On 4th June of this year, 2021, Indian-born artist Anish Kapoor wrote in The Guardian, "Now Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi was the architect of what he called the Hindu Taliban." Shouldn't come as any surprise, both with Anish Kapoor and with The Guardian. This newspaper has a long history of fomenting anti-Hindu hatred, almost the levels of National Front's Bulldog back in the 1970s and 80s, if you look in that context, because other communities trying to have their say are not demeaned in such a manner. But The Guardian allows Anish Kapoor to make his fantastic conspiracy theory claims and fomenting hatred. Now, this latest rant from Anish Kapoor came as a result of Modi wanting to replace India's Parliament building with a new one. The present Parliament building dates from the time of the British Raj, after 1911, when the capital was moved from Calcutta to Delhi. And it's said to be inspired by Mughal designs, which according to Anish Kapoor qualifies as being Islamic. It is not part of India's Islamic heritage at all. It is part of the British colonial heritage. Kapoor goes so far as to link this to the destruction of the Babri Masjid in 1992, and calls Bimal Patel, who is the architect of the new building, Modi's very own version of Albert Speer, Hitler's architect. A totally absurd claim. As mentioned, the late outburst by Kapoor from The Guardian should not come as a surprise. This hate-filled excuse for a newspaper is institutionally Hinduphobic. Hence Kapoor lets his anti-Hindu nightmares run rampant in his online rag, much as Julius Streicher did with the Nazi mouthpiece, Sturmer. However, this does round counter to another very important part of The Guardian's narrative, namely its support for Palestinian refugees and Palestinian rights. And this is where Anish Kapoor's background becomes very interesting indeed. Anish Kapoor is the son of a Jewish mother from India and an Indian Hindu father. By that alone he qualifies as being Jewish, and according to the Jerusalem Post dated 10th of February 2017, his home life was imbibed with a rather secular, nevertheless cultural Judaism. More importantly, under Israel's right to return policy for immigration, he qualifies as Jewish. This means that he can settle in Israel, while Palestinians born before 1948 in that region, and who left during the exodus of Arabs, known as the Nakba, cannot. In this same Jerusalem Post article by Steve Linder, Kapoor said he was an artist, not a politician, which comes as a surprise, because he gets his nose in politics all the time, especially when it comes to attacking Hindus. Even though he wasn't a politician, he did say if he felt obliged to speak out on behalf of refugees, namely the millions of Syrians displaced by war in their own country. This elicited quite an interesting response from The Guardian itself. In 7th June of that year, artists Miranda Pennell and John Smith lambasted Kapoor for a supposed gesture for refugees. You see, the problem was Kapoor made a statement about refugees when accepting the Genesis Prize. This prize rewards commitment to the state of Israel. Hence, Pennell and Smith exposed a blatant disregard by Anish Kapoor for the Palestinians, who he seems not to mention. He seems blind to them. This exposure of Kapoor's hypocrisy was highlighted by the Artists for Palestine and the boycotting movement known as BDS. Indeed, Anish Kapoor has been notable for his complete silence on the treatment of Palestinians. He stayed completely silent in the recent escalation of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. He then emerges to lambast this non-existent Hindu Taliban, while again ignoring the plight of millions of Palestinians who are refugees and live in poverty and are subject to degrading treatment. On 27th April 2021, Human Rights Watch denounced Israeli policies towards the Palestinian Arabs as being tantamount to apartheid. There's not a word from Kapoor on this. Anish Kapoor has ignored this treatment of the Palestinians as well as all atrocities committed against the Arabs, notably the mass expulsion and exodus from Israel known as the Nakba in 1948. That same year, the massacre at Deir Yassin by Israeli soldiers of Arabs, and the massacre of refugees in 1982 in the camps of Sabra and Shatila, where Israel invaded in southern Lebanon. Nothing at all from Kapoor on this. Other human rights bodies discuss it, other Palestinian rights bodies discuss it, yet Kapoor is completely silent on the issue. He has also not mentioned how Israel historically collaborated with apartheid South Africa on nuclear military technology, and Israel supplying arms to Pretoria in the last days of apartheid. This is when other countries actually cut off from South Africa. Now, contrast this with India. India was the first non-Arab country to recognise the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO's authority, as a sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. The PLO office was set up in the Indian capital of Delhi in 1975, with full diplomatic relations established in March 1980. India recognised Palestine's statehood following the Foreign Declaration on 18th November 1988. Now, Narendra Modi himself, this architect of Kapoor's fictitious knowledge in the Hindu Taliban, he himself visited the West Bank on 10th of February 2018. This was the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to the Palestinian territories, and here is conferred with the Grand Collar of the State of Palestine. So while Anish Kapoor totally ignores the Palestinian refugee issue, we have the so-called architect of the Hindu Taliban, Narendra Modi, going to the Palestinians and offering his support. Al Jazeera News, which is based in Qatar, reported that Modi hoped to see an independent Palestinian state living in an environment of peace. Modi also visited the Yasser Arafat Museum where he laid a wreath. He looked forward to reaffirming our support for the Palestinian people and the development of Palestine. He also announced one-time project assistance worth $42.1 million in education, health, women's empowerment and capacity building for the Palestinians. In December of that year, however, India voted against the United States' decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel at the UN General Assembly, in a step that was in line with New Delhi's traditional support to the Palestinians. In November 2019, Modi again reiterated his support for Palestinians, as India again did itself at the United Nations in May 2021, a time when Anish Kapoor, who fears a Hindu Taliban in India, was silent on the whole war situation taking place where Palestinians have suffered. So, if India and Narendra Modi act like the Hindu Taliban, why is it that Narendra Modi and the Indian government is speaking on behalf of Palestinians and is not ignoring their plight, while Anish Kapoor is totally biased in favour of Israel and ignores the Palestinian Arabs? Even when he talked about Syrian refugees, now what caused this Syrian refugee issue? It was caused by ISIS. Anish Kapoor has written that he understands why certain disaffected people would join ISIS. The very same people who caused the refugee issue in Syria. And Syria's President Assad, counts on support from India. So how is this consistent? Anish Kapoor denounced the very same Indian Prime Minister who is on good terms with President Assad and is good terms with Palestinian Authority as Taliban, fascist, Nazi and ultra-nationalist. He claims that Modi has rendered millions of Muslims stateless by taking away their citizenship. In fact, that law which he refers to under this, again, blatant lying, was the amendment to Indian citizenship, which referred to refugees seeking asylum from religious persecution in neighbouring countries as helping those minorities out. The irony and sick joke in all this is that Kapoor ignores this millions of Palestinians can be rendered stateless by the very country which honours him with the Genesis Prize. This would explain his complete silence on the recent escalation of violence, the treatment of Palestinians and the atrocities of places such as Deir Yassin and Sabra and Shatila camps. By throwing mud at others, Anish Kapoor wants to hide his very own Taliban, fascist and ultra-nationalist attitude towards the Palestinian Arabs. This stands in stark contrast to India under Narendra Modi, which has helped the Palestinians politically, with investment and humanitarian efforts. The sad fact remains, however, that The Guardian allows Anish Kapoor to spout his venom and will not expose him for his glaring hypocrisy and complete lack of humanitarianism when it comes to Palestinians. And someone like Anish Kapoor, who claims that he has sympathy with refugees, he fears this fascist state in India, is ignoring the plight of one of the most important and unsolved issues of refugees that's been going on for decades, and he's ignoring it. It's Basing for Pagan Savage. Thank you.